so I can send it to you guys after. Great. Okay. So there's two main things that we must remember. The first is to be engaged in what you're talking about. That is huge, right? Nobody has written this for fun, I suppose, what you're reading. And the author has so much at stake here and cares so much about what they have written that we need to honor them by being engaged. So even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if it's not interesting to you, even if you think it's poorly written, it's the same as commercial voiceover, right? It's the same as any kind of voiceover. You got to sound like you're engaged. You got to buy into it, right? Same argument as being a vegan and doing a KFC commercial. We got to buy it. So being engaged into what you're reading and also sounding credible. So sounding credible is kind of a big deal. Because if you're talking about something and you're like, no one's buying it, then they're going to stop listening. So do you know what you're talking about? If it's a science narration and it's something that is completely out of your scope, like my first narration personally was a medical narration, not a clue. Don't know what I'm talking about. That's okay. I did not study. I asked questions. What is it about? What's the general idea? What part of the body or the planet am I talking about? Oh, okay. So a very broad, but I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And that's the important part, right? So how do you do that? How do we do that? How do we sound credible? First thing is breathing from the diaphragm. We all know how to breathe from the diaphragm. If you don't, put your hands here and your stomach will move as your diaphragm lifts up and down. Super important in narration, especially because it's long form. Really, we could do 100 commercials that are 23 seconds, 24 seconds, and we wouldn't have to breathe in the middle of it. Narration, audiobook, we're going to need to take some breaths. So breathing from the diaphragm, a relaxed posture as well. Most people that I talk to prefer to sit while doing narration because the recordings are 4 to 5 hours long at a time. In ACTRA, for our union up here in Canada, there are 4-hour bookings for audiobooks. So that's a long time to stand. So yeah, I think a relaxed posture sitting down is good. A lot of people also like to sit on stools. So there is no back. So you can kind of position your legs differently and a bit grounded. So everybody needs to choose how they want to sit. A slower pace. Most people when they begin to read narration, they read too quickly. So we'll look into that today. We'll see how speeding up and slowing down affects the understanding and the credibility. The ends of sentences. We're also going to hear today how some people want to go up at the end and some people want to go down on the end, and some people have a mixture, and some people never end it and just keep going. They just keep going. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. I had a student this week who ended everything up like this, like absolutely everything, and everything she said was all ended up. Okay, there's no confidence in there, right? The number one thing that struck me about her was that holy lack of confidence, even though what she was talking about was sounded very professional, no confidence at all, right? So we're going to explore that today. You don't know, and again, you don't have to know everything about it. Obviously, I have given you guys very, very short clips from novels. If you got this job, you would obviously read the whole book. And also, if the author is still alive, most of the time you get to speak to the author and ask questions. If you don't understand something, it's great. I mean, you'll have lots of chats with the producer and hopefully with the author as well, it's kind of exciting. Now, in generally audiobooks in Canada, I don't know about the States, but generally in Canada, audiobooks are the lowest paid of all professional voiceover. It is for the love of it, for the love of it. And I actually think it's wonderful practice. I actually think practicing reading out loud every day, I highly recommend it in all of my coaching and all of my homework. And that also serves, I do it especially because of the breath, right? Getting used to that natural breath when performing. Because in everything else, I don't really think about my breath until I get to an audiobook audition. And then I'm like, yeah, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? Right. So you don't have the opportunity to mark your breaths either, like you would in a song or even a shorter piece. Now, there are 3 types of narration. There is first person, second person, and third person. They're all different, right? So first person is I. The narrative says I, and it's from the direct experience. So you are speaking as that character. So that's an interesting one because that is that's acting, that's wall-to-wall acting. You are playing a character while reading, right? Okay. And then there's second person narrative, which is you, yourself, yourselves. For example, you should be proud of yourself, which is pretty rare in narration, second person. And then there's third person. So it belongs to the person being talked about, which is also very popular, like first person. So he, him, she, her. I noticed that she was, right? Itself, they, them, themselves. So it's third person, speaking about other people's experiences. And oftentimes in third person, you have all of the characters coming in to represent themselves. Now, one other thing here before we get started, when you have a character that you are speaking for, I like to create a physicality to get me into that character. We're not choosing a voice, just like animation, just like commercial, just like all the other forms of voiceover. We are not choosing a voice and using it. We are choosing who this character is, maybe a couple of quirks to this character, a couple of character traits. And the voice instinctively comes from those choices and not the other way around. I've said this a million times. I know Tanisha was in my many, many classes over the past year, the commercial drop-ins, and you've heard me say this, right? You've heard me say this a million times. The voice doesn't get chosen. It comes from the choices from the character. So a librarian, for example, she has a colorful past. She puts on, and this is in the character description in the text. She may put on a brave face. She always has her hair tightly in a bun. She never wears makeup. She rarely smiles at work, but she has a private life as well, right? And we don't know anything about the private life, but it's like, what makes her tick? Is she a swinger? Like after work, is she a like, does she love her edibles? Like, what is it? Like, what we can fill out the character for ourselves to give her something. So the physicality, maybe her head is tilted back a little bit and her posture is absolutely excellent when she's speaking. And then look what happens to the voice as well. It becomes more articulate, right? So it's choosing little character things, and then the voice comes out of that. Does that all make sense? Yash. So when you get to that part of the narrative, there are some people that take different color highlights when they have that character. That passage or those lines from that character is in a different color. And at the beginning of your own notes, it has the color with the character description on it and a physical description or physical tick, something, either posture or talks out of the side of her mouth, right? Maybe she's, and then that dictates also her posture, right? Maybe she talks with her hands on her hips all the time. So something, just one physical characteristic to help you change just a little bit, not too much. Okay. Also, how close are you? How close are you? And we're going to practice that today as well. Are you like right here, right close up to me, telling me this story? Because all narration is storytelling. And all of you have told a story at least once, right? In commercial voiceover, sometimes we use slash breathing, which is before a long passage, and then you don't want to, right? So, and then they just snip it out. In narration, that doesn't exist. It's natural. It just happens. Look at, I've been breathing this whole time and I haven't thought about it once. And there's been no like dramatic audible breaths. So today we're going to try and find that natural breathing pattern that you have and allow the breath to just come in naturally. Most audiobooks, they don't take the breaths out because it sounds unnatural. And what they are looking for, what one of the goals is for me as the listener to connect with you and the story you're telling. And if I don't actually hear you breathe, are you real? It sounds less real. So we can't connect to it as much, right? It's not an announcer. It's only $4.99. She doesn't breathe. She never breathes. And we don't care. We just want to know what the deal is. But in a narration, we want to connect. We want to feel like we know you. That's one of the reasons that people seek out a narrator that they like and listen to the books that they narrate, as opposed to following the author because they like the narrator so much. It's funny because my 83-year-old mom, she has a list of the narrators she likes, and she follows them, not the books. It's because she can't even stand some of the narrators. And she calls me to tell me, you need to coach this girl because everything ended up and I couldn't stand it. Good. Thanks, mother. Okay. So how close are you to the action? Are you talking to one person? Are you talking to a group of people? Or are you a distant narrator who's observing from above? Those are sort of the three choices, right? And it's interesting because they will connect differently. And so we're going to try that. We're going to try the three different perspectives. Getting closer. What does that mean to get closer? It's more intimate. You may not use your full voice when you're up close and personal. And the text always has the answers. The text always has the answers. Okay. So those are just a few things. Now, finding the breath, you can mumble through it to find your natural breath. Mumble breathing, mumble narration is like here I've got a bill here. So manual parts in your receipt or packing slip for a full refund or replacement. Personal information is to be removed from any item before returning it to the store. So I took a breath in there and I'm sort of mumbling through it because I'm focused on mumbling and the words and not my breathing. And I had a nice natural breath in there. So it's sort of like memorizing the feeling of breathing normally. It's not always natural to find the breath in a piece. That's why practicing reading different types of narration out loud, fiction, nonfiction, will help, because you'll start to forget about your breath and just allow it to happen. And if there's a weird breath that somehow appears, audio engineers, they're so magical. They just take the breath out, right? And in some cases, if the action is dramatic, who has let's see, I think I gave it to you, Michelle. Your turn to suffer. Yeah. This piece is like, it's pretty dramatic, right? And what happens is like, it's pretty intense. I read the whole chapter and it's like, it's like hanging by your, it's really, really intense. It's super cool. So that could be like, there could be a breath like as the character, because the narrator is an actor. We are acting. So we choose how to engage. So let's try some to sort of back up what I've been saying. Who would like to go fast?
Down on audiobooks or audible.com, I think I looked on. And it almost sounds like what's that movie, Grey Gardens, with Drew Barrymore playing. Do you know what I mean? I thought about
I've
that.
seen all of the Grey Gardens. I've seen the
Yeah.
original
Yeah.
documentary by the brothers, which is
Yes.
amazing.
I think I've seen
Then
that
I've
one first.
seen the
Yeah.
Jessica Lange movie as well. That with
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's incredible.
it kind of got me that kind of a feel, almost like a
Mm,
reflective, nostalgic, almost celebratory of the main subject, and then kind of almost exploratory with the girl who's going back to kind of, I guess, rediscover herself in a way as an
yeah,
adult,
through
though.
her grandmother.
Through her grandmother as an adult, yeah, not a young girl, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there is an innocence to Lizzie as well.
Mm-hmm.
There is an innocence to Lizzie.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful, and it's very beautifully written as well. So let's
Yeah.
just try one. Let's just try one and see where you're at. This is third person,
Mm-hmm.
third person narrative. Okay.
Definitely third person.
Yeah. Can anybody see that? Small font.
It's kind of small, but I can see it. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Althea had been out surveying the damage after an unusually late frost when Lizzie came up from behind. She couldn't have been more than 7 at the time, but she had known instinctively to keep still, mesmerized by the strange intensity in her grandmother's face as she knelt beside a clump of blackened basil plants and, with eyes closed, passed her calloused hands over them. She had murmured something then, tender words Lizzie could make out. It was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it. Or the sight of those same plants the next day, healthy and green, and without a trace of frostbite. It had been Althea's most startling gift, the ability to raise a nearby dead herb or flower with a touch and a few gentle words. That and an uncanny knack for growing things that had no business flourishing in stingy New England climes. Whispers about her grandmother's green thumb had been commonplace in Salem Creek. Some chalked it up to magic, others to a strict reliance on her almanac. Whatever it was widely accepted that the rocky soil of Moon Girl Farm could refuse Althea Moon nothing.
Good. Beautiful. It's so beautiful, isn't it? So lovely. So much in there. Okay, good. There's a few transitions in there. So let's focus on those. And
Okay.
I think that there is a lot of magic here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's some magic in here. So if that was me, kid, watching my grandmother pass her hand over a plant and the next day it comes back to life, what
Wow.
the,
Yeah.
and she can grow things that nobody else can grow. She's a witch.
Yes.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Or
Right.
a bad
She's a
witch.
good witch. She's a good witch. So I think there's a sense of like, oh
Wonder,
my, yes,
bewilderment.
wonder. And that's right, bewilderment, and you're witnessing magic. So there's going to be a certain tone and a certain wide-eyed, joy in watching, and maybe like a bit of fear, like, what is she doing? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the first note. And the second one is like when she talks about whispers about her grandmother's green thumb had been commonplace. Then she sort of pulls out of that moment, right? She pulls out of that moment and gives you some backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So that would change maybe your tone,
The
your
tone, right?
speed, your delivery, right? She's like, wow, listen, let me tell you about my grandmother. Everybody knows her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that there's a transition there. It was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action. The first time she's witnessing this magic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like the David Copperfield moment. It's like, wow.
Mm.
So there may be some moments where she's like speechless.
Yep.
There's pause. So don't rush through that part.
Okay.
Okay, good. Again.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Althea had been out surveying the damage after an unusually late frost when Lizzie came up from behind. She couldn't have been more than 7 at the time, but she had known instinctively to keep still, mesmerized by the strange intensity in her grandmother's face as she knelt beside a clump of blackened basil plants and, with eyes closed, passed her calloused hands over them. She had murmured something then, tender words Lizzie couldn't make out. It was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it. Or the sight of those same plants the next day, healthy and green, and without a trace of frostbite. It had been Althea's most startling gift, the ability to raise nearby dead herb or flower with a touch and a few gentle words. That and an uncanny knack for growing things that had no business flourishing in stingy New England climes. Whispers about her grandmother's green thumb had been commonplace in Salem Creek. Some chalked it up to magic, others to a strict reliance on her almanac. Whatever it was widely accepted that the rocky soil of Moon Girl Farm could refuse Althea Moon nothing.
Ooh, better. Okay, do one more, just the section at the top until it was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it. Just do the top part for me. Go further, AJ, go further. Be even more mystified. Be even more like, holy crap. That in it, she's only 7.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You're not going to believe what I saw. You know,
okay.
She's that's little. Like 7 is little.
Yes.
She'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, do you want me to stop it? It was first time? That's where you want me to stop, or you want me to read that one?
But she'd never forgotten it.
Okay.
First time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it. That's how a little kid would be like, I've never forgotten it. I will never forget that, right? It's like, it's imprinted. It's so impactful. Because we, as the narrators, can be judgmental about what's going on. We should be.
Right.
We should make a decision. We should have an opinion. Right? Right off the top, Althea had been out surveying the damage after an unusually late frost when Lizzie came up from behind. Describe to us, right? Like, Judge Althea. How is she surveying it?
The damage.
Those are little moments too, right? Those are choices. As the narrator, we can be judgy. We can have an opinion about what's going on. Just a bit, right? Mesmerized. Okay, one more time, just right up to forgotten it.
Okay.
And it's okay if you go too far. It's okay.
Althea had been out surveying the damage after an unusually late frost when Lizzie came up from behind. She couldn't have been more than 7 at the time, but she'd known instinctively to keep still, mesmerized by the strange intensity in her grandmother's face as she knelt beside a clump of blackened basil plants and, with eyes closed, passed her calloused hands over them. She had murmured something then, tender words Lizzie couldn't make out. It was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because it's like, we are going with you. And if you watch this back, because I'll send it to everybody after we're done. If you watch this back, your first read to just this part right here, is like a mile wide in difference. Like, it was the first time she'd ever seen her grandmother's gift in action, but she'd never forgotten it.
Yeah.
It was the first time she'd seen her grandmother's gift in action. She had never forgotten it. Stamp, impact, right there. Introducing the character, stamp. And as the listener, we're like, oh boy, what's next?
So it's gonna be
What's
something
next?
later.
What's she? Yeah, and what's she gonna do with that impact? Right. So we start to care about the character. Those are the little moments where the listener goes, oh, wow, I wonder what happened to her grandmother. I'm going to keep listening. Wonder what happened to her. What did she do with that impact, that moment? Right. So it's, we buy into the character.
All right.
Well done.
Thank you.
Done, AJ.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, who's next? And you know, I personally wear one headphone almost all the time. I never wear both. And when I'm in a character storytelling, thing like I had to have those boots, like a Winners commercial or something that's like decadent, some sort of, there's no headphones. I just want to get right into my story. I don't need to listen to myself. I need to hear the director in between. But I don't need to listen to myself that much, because when I wear both, I just prescript how I'm going to sound. This is my voiceover voice. Nobody wants to hear that. Right. So it's like, it's too much in our head. You have the ability to storytell, which we just saw or we just heard. It's almost like freeing ourselves up a little bit. It's just like freeing ourselves up to just perform and tell the story. And there's so much nuance in that second read. So well done. Well done.
Thank you.
If you've got a gig that's like, coming this week, it's only, da 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 da. It's like the announcer which is not attached to any emotional body, right? Those announcer guys, they're like, blah, 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 blah. Their cans, their headphones are so freaking loud. They wear both, because I've been in the booth right after those guys before, and I'm like, Jesus, like what? Why? I need to hear my voice. Like and those guys, because there's no emotional. There's nothing emotional. There's no storytelling. It's just announcer copy. It's detached. That's the only time it works. That's the only time I've seen it work. But narration, if you're going to read a story to me for 6 or 8 hours or 10 hours, I need to connect with you, and I need to connect emotionally. So you need to be connected to the story that way too. And losing the cans helps. It just helps.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well done, everybody. Does anybody have any questions? We'll do nonfiction next time.
Well, I guess I'm just curious, like if it's like a nonfiction, not like a biography, but like a nonfiction, like history or like political or psychology or, something like that. That's not that there's no personality, but it's, I guess, a different kind of personality.
You still have to have a decision. You still have to have an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. You still have to have a little bit of investment and engagement in it. Otherwise, we check out. Yeah. No matter what it's about. It's like I wish I had a medical narration here, because it's like, maybe I'll do a little video on the medical narration, and like, because that one is the least. It's like, what the hell am I talking about, and who actually cares? Like the structure of the cell in the is and then the words they use, or like the pharmaceutical narrations. Mm-hmm. Like just kill yourself right now, because the words are ridiculous. They don't mean anything. It's almost like you're speaking another language, but you still have to care. You still have to care. Like, we've got to find a way to engage in the copy. It's like the intricacies of the cell, like even just like, right? Just digging in a little bit. It can still be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Medical narration, pharmaceutical words, Pharmaceutical words are ridiculous and you must write them out. Don't ever try and say them. If you get something, don't ever try and say it without looking it up first. Don't. And if you get an audition, one of those things, whoever sent it out should have written the way it sounds in brackets.
Mhm.
Yeah, they usually do. They usually do because they're like, they get back all sorts of auditions like, what the hell did she just say? I don't know. I don't even know what that was. And it's really hard. It's really hard for them. But yeah, there's even a level of emotional investment in those in like a psychological, like a textbook, a
Well,
nonfiction textbook.
yeah, well, that makes sense because a lot of times I feel sometimes how much investment to have, because it can be then about the person telling the story as opposed to the story.
That's
And
right.
that's what I don't want to do, So sorry, that was my dinging someone.
That's okay. But that's where the practice comes in, right? Like if I come up close and personal in a medical read, and then you listen back to it and go, okay, that's too close. Like you're not under the knife and narrating what's happening to you, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about something from over here.
Yeah.
So, or try it from way over there without any emotional investment. See how it sounds. Listen to medical narrations. They are oftentimes quite far back.
Yeah.
They're quite far back. Yeah.
I
Very
would
articulate and
I would want to practice her read. I'm sorry to break you up, but Michelle's read, I really would love hers because that demo that I got from the last time I did a demo like 4 years ago, I had a little snippet of something like hers, and it was almost like a mystery, and in a car, and then it stopped. And so hers, I'm like, I would love to practice that myself because
oh sure, I can send you that one if you want.
send me that one because I like how long it is, and then I like you said, you can play with the levels and when to start feeling the panic in the voice, and
Yeah. I mean, these were all so different, right?
Yeah.
And you see that every single one of these scripts, just so small, right? So short, had transitions and had the opportunity to come closer, further away, dig in, build it, pause, change your tone, change your tempo. Like every single one of these scripts, and they all had a different way. They were all well written, which was nice. But all different flavors, all different feelings, and all like so many opportunities, and every single narration has those transitions. Every single one of them, right? Maybe not medical narrations, except at the end when they it's coming to your pharmacy soon. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, sorry, I got a
Thank you.
ding, but
Thanks. Nice to meet
Okay, I'll
everybody.
send you the recording.
Yes,
Awesome.
please do. Please do.
thank
Thank
you,
you,
guys.
Janice.
Great work.
Thank you guys.
Thanks. Good
Okay.
night.
And let me know if
Sorry
you have
about
any
that.
questions. Just email me.
I sure will. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for your work.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, guys.